Good afternoon and welcome to Cueball's Cutting Corner. My name is Cueball and I am here today to share with you some differences between the first version of the EMPEDC Nymble X and the recently released version 2 Nymble X. And there are a few differences between the two that really set the version 2 apart from version 1. And we'll get into that in just a moment. So for those who don't know me, I am Cueball, better known as Chris amongst my friends. I reside here in Chandler, Arizona, and I am into pocket knives and EDC. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been able to acquire a pretty substantial collection of pocket knives and various EDC items such as flashlights and pens and coins, etc. Really, and Hanks, as you can see. But I really have found an amazing community here and just am blessed to be a part of it. I've shot pool for about 30 years. When we had COVID hit, obviously shooting competitively and going out with the lockdowns and everything, it wasn't quite available for quite some time. And so I was looking for a hobby that I could get into where I could meet some awesome people. I love art as well, and there's a lot of artistic beauty that goes into these designs in the pocket knives, as well as in the other various EDC items. So it just really was kind of right up my alley. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment, which obviously is the right to bear arms and to protect ourselves. But I'm also an avid believer that, hey, a good knife is a great tool to have, and it can also help in a pinch if you need it. So, but my main reason for collecting pocket knives is, to use them to cut and just, everyday tasks, but also just enjoy, the beauty and the form and the function that goes into these designs. Again, I'm very blessed to have the collection that I have, and look forward to adding more examples in the future. So a little bit about me in terms of, just where I came from. I was born in Kansas in 1975. I am 47, going on 48 years of age. I grew up primarily most of my life in Washington State. I lived about 35 miles north of Seattle in a little place called Marysville, Washington. And graduated high school in '93, went to college, dropped out of college, spent some time in the pizza industry, and eventually got a job working for a very large maintenance, repair, and operational supply company. And I've been with that company since 2004, and it's been a great ride. I've been able to relocate here to wonderful Arizona. Actually, my folks, my grandmother live here now as well. So, and then what's really cool is that we have a really awesome knife community here in Arizona that we are continuing to build. And we've had several knife meetups since our first meeting of only 3 people. It has now grown to about, I believe, 17 or 18 members. And it's continuing to grow, which is awesome. So anyways, why am I here? Well, to be quite honest, there's a few folks in the knife community who already have channels, who are already influencers, who have asked me, why am I not producing content? Because I am really big into this hobby, and I've worked, to support other knife channels behind the scenes. I've shipped out, I can't even tell you how many knives over the last 1.5 to 2 years. To help with content. I've support, multiple channels, or have supported multiple channels in the past. Obviously live streams. I'm a moderator for multiple knife channels for live streams, and doing super chats, obviously, has help support those folks as well. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this to share my love of the hobby. I'm doing this to, maybe add a different perspective that maybe some of the other knife channels haven't offered yet. If I'm just repeating something else that somebody said, that doesn't make any sense for me to be here, right? So this is truly my honest take on what I like about a certain knife, what I don't like about a certain knife. I do not get knives sent to me. I don't expect to. I buy all my knives, or sometimes they are gifted to me by friends. But this is really my opinion on what I feel is either good or bad about a particular knife. So today, being that this is my first real sit down, let's go to the table and look at a knife video, I have right here in front of me two very awesome knives. These are both Nymble X by EMPEDC. John, the owner of EMPEDC, and his lovely wife Jamie live up in Tacoma, Washington. So they're very close to my neck of the woods where I did most of my growing up. Actually lived not that far from Tacoma. Shot a lot of pool in Tacoma when I was in league up there in King and Pierce County. So very familiar with that area. But John has really put together some of the neatest designs this last few years since he's launched EMPEDC. And the Nymble X to me is really the epitome of his designs, at least to this point. It started off with ordering a Nymble, the original Nymble. And that was when I actually bought that when he was just releasing the Fat Boy, which I also have, or it's Fat Boy, it's the Thick Boy, my apologies. And I'm not editing this video, just so you know. I'm just doing this straight off the cuff. I don't have any editing skills, at least at this point in time. Sure, I will improve my productions, but for now, you're just getting the raw, real me. But when I bought, was looking at the Thick Boy, I noticed that the Nymble was for sale, and I went ahead and purchased that knife instead, and I'm glad I did, because I really, really like the original Nymble. The only problem is with the original Nymble is my hands are huge, like really, really big. Maybe not as big as Mike Emler's, but they're big. And the Nymble X fits my size hands much better. Let's get right into these knives. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy each of these. And as you can see, these both have a sheepfoot style blade. More of a drop point than sheep's foot, but this is what is called the Nymble X with the sheep's foot blade. It's a very utilitarian blade shape. I mean, it's a great blade shape for everyday carry. You can slice with it, you can cut with it, you can even chop with it. You can do utility cuts with it. You can do reverse cuts with it. I mean, this is a very, very great blade shape for just your everyday use pocket knife. It is a larger knife, being the fact that it has X in its name. And the one difference, though, that I really feel makes the version 2 stand out more and is just a better, more refined version than the version 1 is that the version 2 has a hollow ground blade. And you're not going to really be able to see, on camera, but it does have a slight hollow grind to it. It's not a deep hollow grind, but it's enough to where it makes this thing really sharp behind the edge, really thin, a lot thinner behind the edge than the original, which has a beautiful flat grind. As you can see, there's some fingerprints on here. My apologies. Very nice machine satin finish on this blade. But again, it's not quite as slicey as the version 2 because, of course, the version 2 has that subtle hollow grind on it. A couple other things about the version 2 that I really like more than I do the version 1. And again, John, thank you so much for listening to the knife community. You really do take your customers' feedback and take that to heart. And some you may not use, but you definitely did take some of our feedback in terms of the version 1. If you were to come out with a version 2, thank goodness you did. And the one area for me was the space in between the finger choil and the main part of the handle. If you look at the difference between the version 1 and the version 2, you'll see that it is less, there's less length there. It's not quite as thick. I don't know how to properly, state what that is there, but other than there's not as much in between, not as much thickness here in between the choil and the main part of the blade. And what that allows you to do is really get your fingers up close to one another when you're gripping this blade. Now, the first one's not bad, but as you can see, there's more space in between my middle finger and my index finger. And to be quite honest, this is not as comfortable as being able to really shift and get most of my fingers up close together when I'm shifting into that finger choil. The other thing that's neat is that the finger choil itself on the version 2 is actually a deeper choil. It's not as shallow as you can see. It goes in deeper than the version 1. And so it really makes me feel more secure locked into that blade, into that finger choil. A couple other subtle differences here is if you notice the pivot collars, there is not a pivot collar here on the version 1. It's just the pivot itself, but there is a pivot collar that you can replace on the version 2. And in fact, I did just that. When I ordered the version 2, I also ordered the Damascus hardware kit. I decided not to utilize all of the hardware. Those, you can see I kept the black screws on this one. There are anodized screws that you can use. I just went ahead, and there's also an anodized pivot, and I chose to go ahead and just use the subtle Damascus pivot collar with the original black pivot, and then I changed out the black backspacer with the Damascus backspacer, and then also the pocket clip. But all the rest of the hardware, the screws, I left the same, and I really like how this one turned out. The first one here has all original hardware except for the pocket clip. The pocket clip actually did come with a backspacer, and I chose to leave all the original hardware because there was a lot of gold that was in this version of the Mokutai backspacer, and it just gives it a little bit of a pop. So I thought it was just too much going with the rest of the hardware as a different color. I really liked just the subtle pop of color. Even the backspacer, I just chose to keep it the original bronze backspacer. So anyways, yeah, so that's another difference is the pivot collar. Obviously, the different options for the Damascus. You have the Damascus here, you have the Mokutai here, and so they are a little bit different in terms of the style. Obviously, this first one has the frag pattern milling that is in the handle, which feels really good in hand. It's not too aggressive. It's just the right amount, to get a nice purchase on that knife. And to be honest, one thing I do like about the first one more than I do the version 2, the version 1 on this particular one without the coated blade has a little bit grippier jimping that goes along the spine of the blade. And I feel a little bit more locked in up here with my thumb than I do with the version 2, which has this coated blade. And I'm sure that has something to do with the fact that this is a little bit slippier than the version 1 is just because there is this coating. I'd like to actually get the non-coated blade in hand of the version 2 to see if that still has the same feeling and tactile textures as this one here on the version 1. As far as weight is concerned, they're both about 4.3 ounces. They both have the same internal milling in terms of the where it's milled out on either side of the handle. On the inside, it's milled exactly the same. So there's no difference in terms of the weight. The length is exactly the same. There is a little bit difference in the thickness, and this is another subtle difference that I really like. If you look at version 2 compared to version 1, this one's a little bit thicker than the version 2 or the version 1, and it actually gives you a tiny bit better access to the lock bar. And the one other thing about the version 2's lock bar is that it allows you to easily take and not deploy to unlock the lock bar. The first version here isn't too bad, but it's a little bit narrowed getting in there, at least with my big thumb. And then it's a little bit stiffer too on the lock bar itself. So over time, if this is a knife that you fidget with, which this knife is very, very fidgety, it does start to wear on your thumb tip a little bit. And so it does start to become a little bit painful over time. Whereas on this second version, it's a lot easier to take and get into that lock bar and unlock the knife. So in terms of action, they're both very, very good. I do have to give it to the version 2 as far as action is concerned. I think the detent on the version 2 is just a little bit more tuned for all the deployments. I haven't had it as long as I have the version 1, obviously, so this one is more broken in, but with the amount of time that I've spent, little time that I've spent with this version 2, it's actually breaking in a lot sooner, a lot better, or a lot faster than the version 1 did. They both have great acoustics. The version 1 is a little bit more drop shutty just because the version 2 has that coated blade, and again, it's not broken in yet. They both sound very nice. The first one has a little bit higher pitched ting to it. This one kind of goes a little bit clunk when it deploys and locks up. And the version 2 lockup is really, it's very, very solid. They're both solid. Don't get me wrong. They're both solid. But I like the fact that the version 2 has a little bit earlier lockup. So from a lifespan, if you look at the version 1 lockup, it's over 50% already. Whereas the version 2 is probably more like a quarter or 25%. So a little over 50% on the version 1 and a little bit around the quarter or 25% on the version 2. So again, both of these are fantastic knives. If you're looking at purchasing a Nymble X, if you can find the version 1 on the secondary market for a good price, I wouldn't hesitate. If it's in good condition, go for it. It's a great knife. It really is. However, the version 2 really truly refines this design, and it's just that much better. And if you can find a version 2 still for sale and it's going for a good price, jump on it. You will love this knife. It really is a great knife. I will say again that the coated blade may take a little longer to break in than if you had the satin blade. However, I think the coated blade, this all murdered out look, just looks, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. The milling is done so well on both these knives. And the OEM is QSP. So if you didn't know that, QSP actually OEMs these knives, and they really knocked it out of the park. So in conjunction with John's design and their knife making know-how, they really did a fantastic job on both of these knives. All right, well, those are some of the differences that I have come across in the version 1, between the version 1 and the version 2 of the Nymble X. Again, both coveted knives right now out in the community. These have an amazing reputation. John has really knocked it out of the park with this design, and I really am looking forward to future designs from John. He's come out with variations, obviously, of the Nymble W, the Nymble T, the Nymble. What's he going to have? The Z next? I don't know. There's so many cool iterations of this knife that are out there now within just the last couple years since the first Nymble was launched. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. But this happens to be my favorite version of the Nymble. What's yours? I'm curious. If you don't mind, put down in the comments what your favorite version of the Nymble is. And let me know if you have a Nymble X, if you have a version 1 and a version 2. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the differences. And if not, what do you like about your version 1 or your version 2? Or if you don't have a Nymble X, maybe this video will help make that decision for you or help you decide. Anyways, again, my name is Cueball. This is Cueball's Cutting Corner. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to putting out some more content for you and sharing with you some of my experiences with some of the knives that I have in my collection. And thank you again. Hope everybody here has a nice evening. Take care and God bless.